Hello, my name's Heather Holdar. I'm a physical therapist in the district and also the coordinator of the Regional Resource Center.
I'm Michelle Giroto, one of the occupational therapists of the district. We are thrilled to introduce today's keynote speaker, David Levine.
Really, Michelle? David Levine is here? I remember him. He provided a series of trainings to HSD's Special Education Department throughout the last school year.
Yeah, Heather, you're right, he did. He's an empathy educator with a passion for creating the conditions of belonging, connection, inclusion, and emotional safety for all members of the school community.
Michelle, did you know that David has over 30 years of experience in educational and community settings across the globe? As a classroom teacher, an instructional coach, a workshop facilitator, and a parent educator?
Wow. And currently, he's the program specialist at the educational nonprofit Changing Perspectives.
Oh my goodness, and he's the founding director of the Teaching Empathy Institute.
He's also the creator and designer of the School of Belonging Badge Program, a professional training program for teachers, school leaders, and mental health professionals.
Michelle, there's more to this presenter. He's the author of 6 books, 2 of which have won awards, and his writing has appeared in numerous publications, and he hasn't stopped. Currently, he's still writing a book called Where I Want to Be.
Heather, did you also know that in addition to that, he's an award-winning recording artist and a documentary filmmaker?
Michelle, he's even developed a training podcast called The Blueprints for Belonging.
What hasn't he done?
I can tell that we're both very excited to have David presenting for us today.
Please join us in giving him a warm HSD welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks so much. I've never been introduced before like that. It's really embarrassing. Thank you. So I'm so glad to be back here again and to say that some of you I've worked with twice before and then in some additional sessions in the classroom. And so we'll be doing this session and then I'll do 2 one-hour sessions for half the group each time. And I will be going over some things I've done in the past to bring everyone to the same place. But I think these messages are ones that are important here all the time. Yeah, just to let you know that I never intended to be doing anything like this. I wanted to be a classroom teacher. That's what I was really excited to do. And when I got out of graduate school, I went to school at Lesley University in Cambridge, and I got my teaching certification. And it was at a time, is anyone from Massachusetts here by chance? So you may remember there was I think it was called Proposition 2.5 back then. And it was basically closed down a lot of fire departments and decreased budgets for schools. And I remember, I still have this letter, I saved it, from 1984 from the Pittsfield School District. It said, "Thank you for your application to be a teacher. There will be no positions for many years to come," it said. I thought, well, welcome to the profession. And so I was looking for a teaching job, and growing up in a musical family, I had been to some music experiences in the Catskills near the town of Woodstock. Woodstock, New York, not Woodstock, Vermont. You've heard of Woodstock, New York, I'm sure, right? And I applied to be a teacher in a school in that area, and it turns out it was the Woodstock Elementary School. And it was mid-October, and I was called up by the principal. In those days, the principal would call you up and say, "I'd like to meet with you in person." And I drove across the Mass Pike, and I went down to the meeting, and he hired me. One-on-one, he hired me, and I started 6 weeks into a new school year. In fact, October 15th, coming up, was the anniversary of my first day. And what he told, the reason they were hiring it was a 4th grade class, a new teacher, is because the other 2 were overcrowded, and they needed to create a 3rd section. And I was hired for that. And he told the other 2 teachers to pick the 9 kids who they felt should go into the new class. And that was the criteria for selection of my first class. So you're laughing because you know what I experienced. And if someone had told me this is what they did, I would not have understood it. It would have been an abstract idea because I hadn't done the work yet with the kids, the real life stuff. And my first day, so excited, so enthusiastic. I really did want to be there big time. And the kids did not. And there was a disconnect. And everything I tried to do, they just would look down at the floor. And I was very confused. They never prepared me for this. Now I'm doing it, and I'm thinking, is this really what I want to do? My first day, my first hour. But I put them in a circle, and I asked them, well, you tell me, anyone, I know we're in a large room, but anyone call this out. What were those kids feeling? Scared. What else were they feeling? Unwanted. Yeah. It's pretty obvious what they were feeling. And they didn't know who I was, and they didn't trust me. But I asked them, what do you like about school? And they had no answer for that. They were the rejects. They knew it. And finally, this one kid said he liked the pizza in the cafeteria. Now, as a musician, I don't use music for entertainment. I use music for conversation and to open people up to reflect. So we wrote a song called Good Pizza. You know the song Good Lovin'? Some of you might remember that song, Good Love. We wrote Good Pizza, and suddenly things started to transform. And I didn't have any of this understanding of the literature and the theory and the research, but we all know what it's like when a kid wants to be in your classroom. They want to be there because they feel like there's a place there. And in these times that we're in, I think of something I heard a mentor of mine once say. His name is Martin Brokenleg. Martin Brokenleg grew up on the Lakota Rosebud Reservation, South Dakota, and he was a professor for many years at Augustana College, a sociology professor. And he once said to me, when we're under stress, we go where we belong. And ever since I heard that, and I was a classroom teacher at the time with my own class, I thought, wouldn't that be awesome if school was that place? When they're under stress, they want to be there. That's where they belong. And that's the focus of the day today. And I don't expect to talk about anything new about how we all need to belong, but I would like to provide some perspectives from my experiences as a teacher. I still work with children in schools. Probably half of the school year I'm in classrooms with kids, grades K through 12, pre-K through 12. I also work with colleagues like you in all levels, including paraprofessionals. Do we have any paraprofessionals here today? A few? One or two? I work with bus drivers, anyone who impacts the life of a young person, and young people are also 18-year-olds and beyond. And so I speak to you as a colleague, not as an expert, and so much of what I share and so much of what I write about, I learn from colleagues like you. But I hope that the day is something that is more than just a day of, professional development, but something that helps us all reflect as we walk back into the classrooms on Monday with our students. Or Tuesday, I guess. And that's my hope and my goal for today. So what I will be doing in this session is kind of laying the foundation for the sessions later today. It won't go as deep, it'll be more reflections, getting you to reflect. And I'd like to start with a story that happened to me, with me, about 10 months ago. My son Gideon was home from school. He had just finished his fall semester at school, at college. And we live in New York State in the Hudson Valley, and he's at school in Boston, and he was home. And it was like the second week of January, and we were hanging out one night, and he says to me, all of a sudden he takes a deep breath and he goes, I feel like I can finally relax. I said, Gideon, you've been home for 3 weeks. What's different? And then he recounted the compression of the end of the semester, studying for exams, finishing projects, social drama, roommate drama, gearing up for his trip across the sea for the spring semester in Spain, which he was very nervous about. The holidays coming up, presents for family, all these things. And he said, I never had any time. I was so busy, and I never could slow down. And I got home, and it continued, but I feel like I finally can slow down. And I looked at him closer, and he was different. He was himself again. He wasn't this high-energy guy that he'd been. And that night, I wrote a song about that conversation. I'm going to give you a little bit of the lyrics to it. I won't sing it for you, but it's called when I go slow. And when I go slow and look around, I plant my feet right on the ground. And I can see clouds floating by, and I can hear birds way up high. And I'm with you, and you're with me. And we can dance and we can sing all through the day when all is calm. If we go slow, this is our song. The days are bright, the skies are clear, the nights are still, and you are near. When we go slow, we'll find our way back to our home where we can stay. And I wrote that night. I was up really late learning it, writing it down. And the next morning, I was in a pre-K through 5 school near my home, one of the schools that I work in, once a week. And I was with a group of kindergartners, first class, Miss Reinhardt's class. And I had taught them about breathing. We talked about breathing, just to take a breath, to focus. And I taught them that song. And then spontaneously, I said, let's practice this. And I said, I want you to do this. I want you to just, don't say it out loud, but just think it. Think your name, David, my name, David. And say to yourself, go slow. Think your name, take a breath, and think, go slow. And you can imagine anybody here who works with little ones, they were like so intent. They were like, and then I asked if anyone would like to say it aloud. And they all wanted to say it aloud. Everyone. We put them in a circle and everyone said, Janine, go slow. And they all did this all around. And by the end of the circle, Miss Reinhardt had taken a piece of paper and she wrote, name, breathe, slow. And she put it right on the whiteboard. And that's something called the hidden curriculum. It's not like in your face, like you've got to do this and this is the way we do things. It's just surrounding you. Like I didn't really have a chance to walk through your school today when I arrived. I came right to the auditorium here. But when you have things up in the hallways, especially things that kids have done, or you have things in your classroom and students are engaged with that, whether it's a bulletin board or just their work, it's not just displaying it for back to school night or not just putting it, it's actually called the hidden curriculum. It's there, it's a reminder, it's out there. And she just organically, naturally did that. And what those stories tell, the reason I shared them is with Gideon, my son, he was doing something called inner focus. There's 3 kinds of focus. They're really forms of mindfulness. I define mindfulness as paying attention in a different way. It's not meditation so much. It's paying attention in a different way, seeing the same things that we experience every day with each other, with ourselves, with kids, with our colleagues, with our family, and just noticing things different because we're able to slow down. That's what Gideon was about, inner focus. He said, I can finally relax. I'm not so busy. He didn't let the external scene impact his day-to-day experience, or he worked at minimizing that. And with those kids in that classroom, not only did it start to play out as inner focus, but then what's called other focus. They started to notice kids around them. And they're so empathic, young ones. They're right on the surface. And I know empathy, you heard that I'm the teacher of the Empathy Institute. It's really about paying attention and focusing and being curious about other people, absorbing what's coming in. And when we do that, and this is the work that we do, there's outer focus, the bigger picture. In schools and classrooms, traditionally, we have high expectations of students, but don't always create the conditions so they can reach those expectations. And that's looking at the bigger picture, the system, the outer focus. And when you have students, do you have students engaged in your high school or middle schools, elementary too, but students engaged in some form of like social awareness? Like, whether they're talking about the climate or social change or whatever, are you involved with that in any way? I don't mean like a formal program, but just it's in the conversation, right? That's outer focus. That's teaching the bigger picture, that we're all part of that system. And it doesn't happen to us. We're a part of it. And in the early days of this work, that I'll really get into more in the second session, the research on resilience always looked at social skills development, social skills. And by the way, I consider managing your emotions through inner focus a social skill. Managing, not coping, managing. Coping is dealing, it's passive. Managing is having the skills to say, wait, I gotta slow down here. But I always talk about social skills. The research referred to them, they call them the great protectors. And then they started to call them life skills. It was the same thing. But now, have you heard the term, and I love this term, durable skills? Have you talked about that at all? And when I first heard that, it was from some colleagues at Arizona State University at the Center for Whole Child Education, was their title. And they mentioned in a conversation, I said, wait, hold on, what do you mean durable skills? Well, that's what these are. These are skills for their life. And they really focused on this Tempe, Arizona, the high school there, durable skill building, where kids had voice in what they were really focusing on their last 2 years of high school. Whether it was learning how to take someone's blood pressure. I loved it. I saw this little video. This one guy, he was like in a shop room, and he said, I can't tune out all the noise going on and everything that's happening in my life. It's so busy, the world, the news. But he was into welding. He goes, but when I put that welding helmet on, everything is great. And I'm doing my work. And he was smiling, and I imagined that kid struggled in school prior to him being given that pathway to do his thing. Because someone was other focusing on him. And it led him literally to be inner focus. So there's inner, other, and outer. These are three forms of mindfulness, paying attention in a different way. And that lays the conditions, creates those conditions in their life trajectory for happiness, success, and productivity within their communities. So that's really how my career has evolved, from that first class of kids who were like, why are we here, to you understand why I'm here, with those kids at the durable skills. And this is kind of a foundation for what we'll do today. Now, what I have come prepared to reference for the rest of our time together is a paper that was put out 2 years ago called the Belonging Barometer. And a barometer measures pressure, right? So it's the pressure that people have to find their way. And you heard I'm writing a book right now called Where I Want to Be. I was working on it all summer, but the name of the book was called Longing to Be. My whole premise was kids just want someone to hear them. And my son Gideon, as I mentioned him before, he's 21, he was home for the summer. He was working on his music across the hall in his bedroom, and I was in my other son's bedroom. He moved out. He's older now. And I was working on the book, he was working on his songs, and we'd open the door, how's it going, Dad? He'd play me a song, and I'd read him something from my book, which he was very polite to listen to, because it's not really an exciting thing. But the night before he went back to school, we're sitting around this little fire, and he goes, you know, Dad, I don't like the title of your book. I don't think it's good. I go, why? I could live with that also, longing to be. And he said, I think you should call it Longing to Belong. I thought, okay, that's cool. But then I got to thinking about it for a few days. I agreed with him. I didn't like the title either, because it was saying something's wrong. I wish it was better. That's coping. And I thought, I'll ask teachers I work with. So in the beginning of the school year, I was just talking to all my colleagues in 3 different schools in Kingston, New York, near where I live. And every one of them was saying things like, you know what I want for the kids? I want them when they get here to want to be here. I want them to be happy to be here, to know that they're welcomed. They didn't even say to know that they belong. They just want to be here. They're excited to see me. They're excited to see each other. I'm excited to see them. And I came up with that, where I want to be, because I think that would be the awesome place to be. How many of you have ever had a student who they didn't want to be there, but because of your work with them and your relationship, after a while, they wanted to be there? Have you ever had an experience? I'm not going to ask you to share aloud, but just, yeah. And how many have ever had a student and they were pretty honest with you? I don't like this subject. I'm not good in this subject. And rather than take that personally, you saw the person underneath that behavior. And they might say something like, I'm still not into this subject, but I like you. Have you ever had that kind of an experience? This is where I want to be. And I know this happens for all of you. So I'm not here to give advice, but to share perspectives. That's my goal for today. And so with that as my introduction, this Belonging Barometer was a survey that was done in America. This is focused on the United States by these two organizations, Over Zero, which they're located in Washington, D.C., and the Center for Inclusion and Belonging, which is the brainchild of a wonderful man named John Powell, who's out at Berkeley, California. And they did this survey, and it's about a 60-page report on a PDF. I could share it with you, and I will share it with the district. But it's, it's very dry, and it's just perspectives from, thousands of people that took these surveys. And I'm boiling it down today to look at what they found and how we're already doing it. And if we name it, we can do it with greater intention. So this is really what the focus is off today. And we're going to look at what it takes to build belonging in these three areas. This is what the report was about: where we work, where we live, and where we learn. And I mentioned that it can become pretty overwhelming sometimes to think about what we're doing with our kids every day, what their lives are like, what they're going through, right? But there's an equation I'd like you to, if you have something to write with, please write it down. If you don't, you'll remember it. It's 3 letters. E plus R equals O. The event plus your response to the event equals the outcome. A lot of times when the outcome is disconcerting or upsetting, it's easy to blame the event. Oh, well, there's issues in the family, or whatever you could say, you blame. We don't have enough materials, I don't have enough supplies, I don't have enough support. There's too many kids, they changed my grade. Those are events. And the outcome is like, I really don't want to be here doing this. I don't want to be here, or they don't want to be there. But the response is where your power is. When you blame the event, you're giving your power away because you can't influence that. You can't change that. But our response is what we're going to focus on with our time today. How can we respond in a different way? How can we change our response to get a different outcome? And that's what the focus is going to be in all of those places. And it's really within our relationships. Right? So I want to do a song for you which takes it out of the head and puts it into the heart. Some of you have heard this song. It's a true story. It was written by a friend of mine who I met in 1986 when I was teaching 6th grade in a little town called Brentwood, New Hampshire, which is near Exeter. And one night I was driving home. I'd been visiting a friend, and before I left her house, she gave me a recording. She said, I just heard this guy's recording today, and he was a special education teacher, and he has this song that he wrote, and I think you should hear it. That's all she told me. So I had a 20-minute drive home, and I'm listening to this guy's recording, and the 3rd song came on. And I'm going to sing it for you now, because once I heard it, I pulled over to the side of the road, because it brought up memories for me of my younger brother, who's neurodiverse at a time when that wasn't even a term that people used. He struggled through school. What saved him was the fact that he was an amazing musician. Bluegrass musician. But in school, he was totally disconnected. And we didn't have cell phones when I heard this. I would have texted him immediately. As soon as I got home, I called him up, told him about the song, and I learned it in his honor. So here it is. It's called Howard Gregg. Some of you have heard this before. It goes like this. Most everyone I knew put the whole Gray family down. They were the poorest family in that little country town. Howard always looked too big for his funny, ragged clothes. The kids all laughed at him, and Jimmy Jones thumbed his nose. Howard sat across from me in 7th grade at school. Didn't like it much, but Mama taught the golden rule. So when the spitballs flew at him, never would join in. I guess that was the reason Howard thought I was his friend. And after things would quiet down, sometimes I'd turn and see the grateful eyes of Howard Gray looking back at me. Howard Gray, oh, Howard Gray, somehow they got their kicks out of treating you that way. Deep down, well, I kinda liked you, but I was too afraid to be a friend to you, Howard Gray. One day after lunch, I went to comb my hair and saw they had Howard against a locker in the hall. They were poking fun about the big hole in his shirt. He had his left arm twisted back behind him until it hurt. To this day, I can't explain and I won't try to guess just how it was I wound up laughing harder than the rest. Well, I laughed until I cried. Through my tears, I still could see the tear-stained eyes of Howard Gray looking back at me. Howard Gray, oh, Howard Gray, I can't believe I joined them all, treating you that way. I wanted to apologize, but I was too afraid to be a friend to you, Howard Gray. But from that moment on, after I made fun of him, he never looked my way, he never smiled at me again. Not much longer after that, his family moved away. That's the last I ever saw, heard of Howard Gray. That was 20 years ago, and I still haven't found just why we'll kick a brother or a sister when they're down. Well, I know it may sound crazy, but now and then I dream about the eyes of Howard Gray looking back at me. Howard Gray, oh, Howard Gray, well, I've never quite forgiven us for treating you that way. I only hope that somehow you can hear this song someday, and you'll know that I am sorry, Howard Gray. We'll probably never meet again. All I can do is pray. May you and God forgive us, Howard Gray. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. So I'd like you just for a couple minutes, just to turn in a moment to the person next to you. And I want you to just, as you were listening to that song, talk about what memory, did any memories show up for you? Did you think of anyone, or a childhood memory, or a recent memory, or a student you work with, or your own experience? And just really quickly, what comes to mind? What surfaced for you as you were listening to that song? Even if it was, I don't know why you sang it in the song, but what came up for you as you were listening to that story? So just really quickly to the person nearby, or grab someone nearby, just chat. What memories came up for you? How many of you had a memory show up from your childhood about someone else? Yeah. And I was only able to listen to a couple of folks, but have conversations. But typically, those memories are emotional. They're emotional memories. And emotion, when you have an emotional experience, you'll remember it. And another word for a memory is a permanent snapshot. You can remember what was happening, what the weather was, what you were, all those things. And it's a really powerful phrase to teach to kids, which I've done, all ages. I ask them, I say to them, you know, we all have these experiences with this thing. Maybe the little ones, I don't use this term, but they all know what you mean when you say social drama. You ever had social, oh yeah, is there social drama in this? Oh yeah, they all are there. And that leads to the bridge of the conversation. What do you think a permanent snapshot is? And someone will say, a memory. And that song hits it so strong. And just to kind of close the loop on that, it was written by a guy named Levine. And those experiences happened in his community in Kansas, where he grew up with this kid. And Lee was a track star. And Howard was from a family of 11 kids. He was the 10th of 11 children in the early 60s. You know, Native American family, completely ostracized. They had the reputation. And I've been there and talked to people who can look back on their memories and like, yeah, oh, those are the Rays. His real name was Howard Ray. Changed because he hadn't seen him, so he changed it slightly. And the short of it is that eventually and then I heard the song, right, that night, and I learned it, I sang it for my students. They did not want to stop talking about it because it wasn't about right or wrong, it was about what's real. This is real. This is real life. This isn't theoretical. This is what happens every day. You're either in or you're out. And we were talking over here, and there's nothing more painful than feeling alienated from the group. And then the behavior shows up. What would a kid, a student, a young person who feels alienated in school, what behavior might they exhibit? Anyone really call it out? Anger. How might it show up? That's the label. How might that behavior show up? What would they do? Say that again? They won't engage. They'll look down. What else might they do? What might the behavior be of the child, the young person who feels alienated, isolated, and alone when they come to school? Yes. They might alienate somebody else. And then they get labeled. Or they might not come to school at all. There's an epidemic of absenteeism, as I'm sure you know, in schools today. And then the label is, well, there's like, you know, intense amounts of anxiety and stress. And we can look to causes, we can look to social media and, you know, what's happening in the world. But I go back to that equation, E plus R equals O. You can't go home with that child, and you can try and counsel their parents. You know, how many of you have ever asked students, what did you do last night? Like, I was playing video games till like 3 a.m, you know. That's the event. What's the response? What do those kids need? I'm not going to ask you to answer that right now. But that song illustrates this guy who looked back and had that permanent snapshot. The memory was buried, and it showed up one night in his mind. It actually was triggered, believe it or not, when he was watching Monday Night Football, and they broke in and said that John Lennon was shot this evening. And this guy was a songwriter at the time in Nashville, Lee Doman, who wrote it. And I made a film of him, so I know what he said. He said, I was thinking, how could someone do that? He didn't even know John Lennon. Why would he do that? And all of a sudden he has this hit like, wow, how many people have I hurt? I'm quoting him. How many people have I hurt in my life? Didn't even know it. And then the memory of Howard showed up, and he wrote that song. And about 5 years later, he found Howard. And we made a film called Dear Howard because students have been writing letters to him, and we brought those guys together. But that's not usually what happens. We look back. And I really believe that we never know what stories our students have experienced. We don't know what chapters have come before, and we certainly don't know what chapters are yet to be written. But when we're with them every day in RR, the event plus R equals O, the response, the conditions we intentionally create, and the resilience research that's called the protective factors, through relationships, can help us write a story together. And maybe for that 41-minute period or 90-minute period or school day or hallway experience, they can be with somebody that they don't feel alienated and isolated from. How many of you can think of at least one student right now who always makes a point to say hello to you because they feel that connection? That's belonging, that's connection. And it grows from there. And that's the essence. And that song takes all the theory and puts it right into the action every day of this work we do. And then we teach them. Don't forget, right, of course, the other things we do and are expected to do. But it all builds from relationships. And this is what I'm going to continue to focus on for the rest of our little bit of time today and for the time we work together later today. And I will provide you with some follow-up short-form audio talks on this for your own, optional continued self-study work. But here's what we've already begun and we're going to continue to work with: focus. Focus is about intention. An intention is an aim, a plan, a commitment we make to ourselves in our own influence. And I'm not going to have you write this down, but right now I'm going to give you like maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds to think of from now until the end of today with me, the time with me at least. What's an intention you'd like to hold right now? Something you'd like to experience, get from this day, something you're going to put into this day. Because as I always say to students, you never know when you're going to have a moment with another person or a group of people that you'll never forget. You never know when that could happen. When I drove up here yesterday from New York, it was a 4-hour drive. I checked into my hotel about 5 miles from here. And I drove over to a place called The Village. Some of you might know of The Village, right? It's a assisted living facility right near here. And I went there because one of my mentors, when I was in my mid-20s, between 25 and 30 years old, I worked very closely with this woman named Arisha McMahon, who's from Sutton, New Hampshire, North Sutton. We were very, very close. I mean, we traveled all the time. She was about 15, 16 years older than me. She was a mentor. Never forgot her. And her son reached out to me in the summer. He said, I just want you to know, Risha, we have Risha in assisted living. She's got early stages of dementia. And he told me it was in White River Junction. I said, I'm going up there in October. I'm going to go see her. And I drove. As soon as I got there, I unpacked my stuff. I went over there and I found her. And I walked in. And she looked at me. I go, hi, Risha. And she goes, and how do I know you? And you know what? I didn't look like the guy that she knew when I was 25 to 30. I wish I was. But I don't look like that. She didn't have memories of my appearance. But we talked about all these people we worked with back then. And we were working in schools. We were doing prevention work and systems work and facilitation and teaching. She knew every one of them. And then she goes, how do you know all those people? I said, Risha, you and I. And I was remembering, and I went through this with my mom, so the memories, they come up and they create meaning and purpose and grounding. I plant my feet right on the ground. And I was there for 2 hours with her. And she said, well, this was really sweet that you came to see me. And she still didn't know who I was, but she knew it felt good. I gave her a big hug. I'll see you in a month. See you in 3 weeks. And that's the response. I was tired. It was a long drive. I was really tired, but I needed to go see her. And it meant so much to me because that was my intention. So just think of your intention just for today. And it's a great thing, by the way, as you know, I'm sure, to teach kids to write an intention. Intention for the day, an intention for the week, to take ownership, inner focus. In the literature on belonging, and I grab things that really strike me as being relevant and authentic and genuine, and this one grabs me, belonging certainty, because the flip side of that is belonging uncertainty. And there's things I'll share with you later today, but just think about when the pandemic first was unfolding, and I don't know what it was like here in Vermont, but it was March 13th, schools closed suddenly in New York. And my son was home from spring break, my older son, and he didn't go back for the rest of the semester till the next winter. And remember those early days of uncertainty, what that felt like. And remember Broken Leg's quote, when we're under stress, we go where we belong. Whether it was with your family or your close friends, and you all knew that you didn't have, COVID, and that was your little group, your folks, man. It made it a little less scary and a little less uncertain. Well, I don't feel that way now when I go into schools or go into my day, but some kids feel that every single day. Uncertain. The ones they walk along the hallways against the lockers and, So we're going to look at belonging, certainty. How can we intentionally create the conditions and the relationships to build that sense for those students? And everything in those relationships is about context. Some kids, they have what's called private logic of the adult world. You don't trust me. You never listen to me. I'm always in trouble. You're always blaming me. Have you ever had a student say that to you? You might say something to a group of kids and they're like, I didn't do anything. And now it's called the conflict cycle. Now it's escalated. Disconnect with an audience. And how do we maintain and manage our own emotional responses to that rather than reacting? We're humans. We want to be honored and respected for who we are every day. And suddenly you're with a student in the classroom or in the hallway or wherever outside, and they challenge you to a conflict. And when there's a conflict cycle, it's not grounded in their opinion of you or who they are as a person. It's grounded in their private logic, how they make sense. We can create new context for kids, even high school students, as you know. And I imagine, and I'll ask some of you later today, I imagine some of you could think of a teacher in your life when you were growing up and going through school who changed you in the way they were with you, their relationship, and maybe inspired you to become a teacher. I'm curious, just a quick show of hands. How many of you became a teacher or were considering teaching because of a teacher that you had when you were growing up in school? Anybody have someone who made a difference and you were like, and that hit you? Context. And it's not just memories, they're emotional memories. Emotion is learning. That's why we have that permanent snapshot of that time when that kid was disconnected from the football team, or when that kid was brought into the football team on practice days. You remember the look on that kid's face. This is all belonging work, and it's within our influence. And finally, again, relationships. Resilience is really about the life trajectory of a person, the durable skills they need, which they learn from you, not through formal instruction, but through demonstration. The way you are with them is teaching them. It's called social learning. They're little babies, they learn from imitating. So when you're someone who asks questions and is truly curious, curiosity is a pathway to belonging, the feeling of belonging. And when they experience that, and you build that then into your curriculum, in the way you teach, through dialogue, these are things we'll explore later. It's really high-level listening, and it's teaching that durable skill of relationship building. And this is what we'll focus on. These are all the conditions for belonging. And this is a list I've shared in the past. I kind of previewed this a moment ago. We all have physical needs. I asked for bottles of water before I started. Krista brought me a couple bottles of water because I knew if I got thirsty, I would have a need and it would distract me. I might even be like, excuse me, all of a sudden, that's my need. I have to get it met. That's a physical need. My room was freezing last night. I had to get up in the middle of the night and find the heat. Like I was motivated to do a change because it wasn't working for me. Those are physical needs. That's why we feed people, students in school. But the emotional needs serve the same purpose. We need them for survival, and when they're unmet, the behavior will reflect it, just as my behavior in the middle of the night reflected it. Just as my interrupting Krista in the middle of a conversation excuse me for interrupting, could you get me water? I had an unmet need, and I needed to get that need met. So these are the emotional needs, as we've focused on the need for belonging, but to put it more succinctly, it's the need for affiliation, connection. I have a place. Belonging. And we'll get into the difference this afternoon or later this morning, the difference between fitting in and belonging. Belonging is very powerful. Affiliation for who I am. Might sound like a cliche, but it's absolutely accurate. For many years, I was very insecure about bringing my guitar into workshops and singing because immediately I've had people say before they heard anything, "Oh, you gonna do like a concert? You know, kind of funny. Touchy feely, you know, all that stuff." And and then a friend of mine sat me down one day and he said, "David, that's what you do. That's who you are. Don't pull back from that. We all have ways of expression, all of us in this room, and doing things. Who we are, longing to be, belonging to ourselves." My son Gideon basically was saying when he said I could slow down, you know what he was saying? I've got my time back to be who I am. He goes to Berklee School of Music, and he's been like completely doing his music thing this year and not always going to class. But he had a mentor experience earlier this week with a very well-known producer who's well-known because he's producing some famous person who I've never heard of. But in Gideon's group, it's a pretty impressive guy. He went to Berklee, he's 28 years old, and he sat down with Gideon and he said some things. And Gideon called us up and he said, "I was crying in the meeting." "What were you crying about?" "I felt heard for the first time at this school." And he loves that school. But there was someone who got him. That's the context, the emotional experience. He felt power. Power is competence. I'm good at something. How does a kid respond when they believe that they're not good in your subject or they're not good in school or whatever it is you're doing? How do they behave? Might they say, "I hate this class"? Ever heard them say that? Or "I'm no good in this"? Or how about a whole class that says, "Oh, we're the bad kids"? Have you ever had kids say that to you? You know, I'm one of the bad kids. That's private logic. Because they need to feel competent, like I'm good at something. That's that uniqueness. It's an emotional need, power. Freedom is voice. Giving them voice. Curiosity, as I said, asking questions, help me understand. And it's not easy. Earlier this week, I was up really early in the morning at my house because I had to complete a proposal for this group in Europe that's creating an app that's for healthy video game play for kids. And they wanted to know if I had some ideas around how to build belonging into that. And they're at, different time zones. So I was up at 5 o'clock for 2 hours meeting with them. And I was really wiped out and thinking and still in that place. And my wife came in, and she's our local children's librarian. And she said, "I was thinking of doing this thing today where we were going to be painting these things." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I walked out, and she goes, "Oh, great, thanks for listening." But I wasn't present for her. And I'm not saying that was good or bad, right or wrong. It's what was real in that moment. Because her behavior reflected, "You're not giving me voice right now," to use the terminology. You know how it feels when you're not listened to, right? It takes concentration. It takes focus. But it's an investment in the relationship with students right now. And fun means to be engaged, to be involved, to be excited, to ask questions about things going on in your life. You create those conditions. This is what belonging really emerges from. And I'm going to get into some practical, this is we'll use a cliche, this is not the why, this is the rationale for all the things that we'll be focusing on for the rest of today and the materials that I'll share with you. This is why we do it. And I'm going to just close with a couple more slides. When a child feels trust, there's something that changes in their brain. I'm not a scientist, and I bet you there's people in here who are really, really knowledgeable about brain development. But I will say that all the time there are new discoveries or new literature or new studies about the malleability of the brain. And, it used to be, you probably heard of ACEs, right? Where you had these early life experiences and they affect the way you are now, and that's all true. But what I learned from a colleague of mine who I work with in New York City is the current work is that the brain, if you have had disconnected experiences as a child in your family, where you were not attached, where you felt abandoned, you were living in a foster home, and it was a struggling experience, that when you have an adult in your life who builds a non-judgmental, non-reactive, but a responsive relationship with you. Who says, you know, the only reason I'm asking you to do more is because I know you can do it. Rather than letting them down, you don't have to do as much. It actually creates new connections that override those early life experience connections. And so when you think of those teachers who were significant, that's kind of what happened, whether you had, you know, adverse childhood experiences or not. They were a person in your life who made a connection of trust, translated as belonging and affiliation. It creates a neurological shift in the brain. And when we have a new set of those emotions, we see the world differently. How many of you have kids who've changed? Like, wow. You ever have that experience? Different this year, right? How many have that experience, right? And it's not huge, it's incremental, but suddenly there's a difference, there's a change. And that's the work that we all do. And I include myself in the equation because that's my focus when I work with kids and colleagues every day. How can we build connections with intention? So I want to close with a song. Maybe I don't have, no, I don't have time for this song. I'll do it in our workshop. But I want to close with the story of the song I'll do a little bit later. I mentioned my friend Risha, who's in the, who I visited yesterday. I went through that with my mom about 7 years ago, and my dad I moved my parents up to be with me and my wife and our kids. And my siblings lived far away in other parts of the country. And I was working every day and being a dad and husband, a partner, and spending every evening over at my dad's apartment and bringing him to the nursing home. I did that for 5 months. And over that time, my father unexpectedly passed away, and then my mom passed away. And it was like, I had to act. I had to do what needed to be done. And it was one day, it was March of 2018. And my mom died like the end of January. So I had like a few months. And I suddenly realized I was at home all by myself. My wife and kids were off somewhere. And I thought, oh man, I have some time to myself. Where I want to be right now. I was able to like have a perspective. And I thought, I want to write a song about mindfulness for kids. And I wrote a song. And I called it A Quiet Place. But the refrain is where I want to be. And when I finished the song, I realized, you know what? That's not a song for mindfulness for kids. That's a song to honor my mom and my dad. And my point is the work we do with our kids and with each other is a way to honor who we are as people and the people who helped make us who we are. The context of those relationships. I really believe this, and I know you do it. So I'll close the session this afternoon or later this morning with that song. But for now, I just want to first say thank you, as the slide says, but ask you, I know it's hard in the large room, but is there anything anyone would like to say based on where you are right now from the things I've shared with you this morning? It's been 45 minutes of time. Any reflections? Anything you're thinking about? Yes, please. It's hard for me to hear. Are you saying the 4 emotional needs? Is it how do you create the conditions for every single student to get? Okay, without being an individual counselor. I think it's really a mindset where those 4 emotional needs, it's a great question. Those 4 emotional needs, that's a blueprint. That is a blueprint for decoding the behaviors of, I'll use this word for kids, but for all people, decoding the behaviors of students. So when a child is behaving, behavior is a form of communication. And rather than labeling the behavior or being frustrated by it, and you might not be able to do this on your own, so you do it with a colleague and you say, you're able to do great things with this kid, what's going on? And you want to unearth what's the unmet need. So let's say the unmet need is power. They don't feel like they're good in this subject. They compare themselves to others. So find ways to provide support to give them a greater sense of success in that lesson or that subject. And this is a much longer conversation, but essentially, rather, you're not a counselor, but it's changing the context of the behavior. The behavior is not antisocial so much as it's a communication that something's not working for me. I don't belong. I don't feel good in this. No one listens to me. This is boring. This is boring to me. That's the behavior. What's the unmet need? And that's really the way I look at this. You know, for instance, I'll close with this as a kind of a metaphor for that. When you were growing up, if you got angry in your home and you said, I'm mad, did you have someone say, you're not mad, you're just tired, or you're just hungry? Did anyone ever learn that that's really what you were feeling? So you kind of like learn that. So then when you're older and you're an adult and you're in a relationship or a friendship with someone and you say, I'm just really mad about this. They go, no. They say, you seem really mad. What's wrong with you? And you go, I'm not mad. I'm just tired. I'm going to go take a nap. Or I'm not mad. I'm hungry. I got to get something to eat. So you learn that that's why you're feeling that. And so you have a behavior. Well, it's true with kids. It's their default. It's their coping mechanism, not their management skill to maneuver and manage. And I'll leave you with this. One of the most critical, durable skills to teach our students is to ask for help when they need it. Ask for help. And that takes relationship building. Thank you so much. And thanks for the question. We'll explore it more later. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.